Good morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name is Ross, and I was always told I had a voice radio. So today, we continue our in-depth look at the Pokemon trading card game rotation. Now, I have already done a video on the quick points of the rotation, my quick guide to the rotation, if you will. Link in the description, check it out, you know the deal. This is the start of our proper in-depth look, though. In the previous video, we looked at the main cards that were going out, and we took a very quick look at how that is going to affect and, to be honest, get completely rid of most of the good decks in the format. Here, we are looking in depth, set by set, to look at some of, all of the cards really that I think you need to know about that are leaving. Now, once again, quick reminder here that a rotation basically means that certain sets will no longer be legal for tournament play. Today, we are looking at the X and Y expansion, which next season, after the World Championships, will no longer be legal for tournament play until we get confirmation that we are going to be getting it. And remember that if one version of a card is legal for tournament play, then all versions are legal for tournament play. So, starting off, we have a Mega Venusaur. Now, I always really liked Mega Venusaur. It had a lot of potential. It was a card that a lot of people could see having a little bit of fun with. 120 damage with paralysis and poison automatically. Looked really, really good. It was a card that I was always a little bit excited about. And the thing that ruined this was it never got a Spirit Link. The Mega Evolution mechanic means that when you Mega Evolve, you have to end your turn. Spirit Links will stop you doing so. Venusaur never got a Spirit Link. There was a little bit of hope in the Generation set when we got a new Venusaur and a new Mega Venusaur that we might get a Spirit Link. We never did. So Venusaur goes into the pantheon of essentially Pokemon that could have been good, but unfortunately never quite made it. Moving on, we have Delphox. Now, Delphox is a card that I liked quite a lot. It allows you to draw until you've got 6 cards in your hand. It's Shaymin EX, but on a stage 2. Now, Fates Collide brought us a new Delphox and a Delphox break, and this gave a little bit of hope. Unfortunately, even with Delphox X and Y's ability, it was always a little bit too slow. The problem is, this really does in for Delphox, because as it was, you would probably want to play 3 of the Fates Collide Delphox, you would use to attack, and then you would put 1 of the X and Y Delphox, you'd get that one out first, and then use that to draw more cards to get your Fates Collide Delphoxes out to be attacking. It was never a great deck, it was never fast or consistent enough, but it was pretty good. Not to mention the fact that consistency in drawing cards is always a big thing, and yeah, right now we've got things like Octillery and Shaymin, etc., so we don't need Delphox. But I get the feeling that in another format, Delphox could actually have been pretty gosh darn good. Now we are losing Greninja. Now this is bad, but it's not the disaster that other cards leaving might be. Now, just so we're clear, Greninja is a deck, Greninja is a good deck, but the main parts, the parts with which Greninja cannot live without, are the Frogadier with water duplicates, which helps you get all your Frogadiers out and set up. The Breakpoint Greninja that is your main attacker as he does the most damage and has Shadow Stitching that can block abilities, and the Greninja Break and his Giant Water Shuriken that allowed you to drop 6 damage counters when you discard a water energy from your hand. Now, Greninja X and Y's Water Shuriken, same ability but dropping 3 not 6, it's a handy thing to have on the bench, but like Delphox, you would be playing 3 of the Breakpoint Greninja and only 1 of the X and Y Greninja. So yeah, you lose those 3 damage counters a turn. Yes, it's a little bit of a pain. It doesn't completely tear the deck apart. It is not ideal by any stretch of the imagination, but it's workable. You can use the deck without it. Now, Raichu from X and Y is pretty gosh darn good. The good news is we had a reprint of Raichu in the Generation set, so it stays in the format. We also got a reprint of the Pikachu, and might I mention, it's a pile of Pikachus. Now, Electrode isn't a particularly good Pokemon. We don't have a great Electrode at the moment, but if we did, we would be wanting to use the X and Y Voltorb. One of the rare exceptions, And I think probably, let's say the boundaries cross Squirtle, where you're actually playing a stage 1 or a stage 2, but the evolving basic is actually really, really good. If it would be knocked out by damage, flip a coin. If heads, put 5 damage counters on the attacking Pokemon. Now, for a brief period, we did have Electrode that drew some cards, and that meant this Voltorb was good. X and Y Trevenant. And this is one of the main cards from X and Y that we are losing. It's got the ability Forest Curse. That means that when you've got him in the active, your opponent cannot play item cards. Now, it was always been good. But there were 2 things that made it really, really good. Number 1 was the supporter card Wally. You could go first, play Wally, and your opponent was essentially locked out of items for the entire game. The other thing was the later released Phantump, which had the Ascension attack for a colourless energy, or if there was a Dimension Valley in play, 0 energy, which meant if you went second and got to attack, you would get that turn 1 Trevenant pretty much all the time. Maybe you would get neither an energy nor a Dimension Valley. Maybe you'd start with something else in the active and not be able to move it. But even if you started something like a Shaman, you could use an energy to retreat it and then use Dimension Valley to pay the attack cost. Point being, Trevenant was good. And yeah, your opponent could always play a card like a Lysander to get around it. But this was the kind of card that would win you games. You get a turn 1 Trevenant and you win. You combine that with Trevenant Break and his Silent Fear attack, 2 energy or 1 with a Dimension Valley, 3 damage counters on each of your opponent's Pokemon, and this gave you some really lopsided wins. You get an early X and Y Trevenant, your opponent's locked out of the game, and then you just put 3 damage counters on everything till everything's knocked out. This was one of the best decks in the format, and make no mistake about it, ladies and gentlemen, this going will shake up the format in a huge way. We're losing Dugtrio. Now, Dugtrio wasn't played a huge amount, although a friend of mine did go to a tournament once and played this with Zekrom, Reshiram, and Kyurem. They've got the Outrage attack. Dugtrio puts damage on them, and then you can hit for either Lightning, Fire, or Water weakness. Pretty cool. 60 damage for a single energy and 10 to each of your bench. Like I say, you use it with the Outraging Dragons and actually it fueled their attacks. It was never a great card, but it saw a little bit of play. I certainly used Dugtrio in a number of decks. The good news is it's been reprinted in Generations. It remains. Speaking of good cards that have been reprinted in Generations, and this is one of those cards I don't think is ever going to be rotated out. That's a lie, of course. It is Yveltal. Now, we saw this with Zekrom and Reshiram when Black and White came out. They got reprinted over and over and over again. This Yveltal from X and Y is being rotated. The promo of it is being rotated because the number is less than 36, and any X and Y promos numbered less than 36 are being rotated out, but it was reprinted in the Generation set. That means that it is still legal for tournament play. You can use the Generations one. But of course, remember what I said in the intro, ladies and gentlemen, because the Generations one is legal, that means the promo one is legal, and it means the X and Y is legal. This is a card that's been used to set up dark decks for a while now. It's a very good starter, 130 HP, you stick a Fighting Fury bat on that bad boy, it goes up to 170 HP, and 30 damage for a single energy while attaching energy to your bench from your discard pile. It's pretty gosh darn good. I believe it's also getting a reprint in Steam Siege as well, so as soon as it would have rotated out, it would be reprinted, except it's already been reprinted. I hope that made sense. Speaking of which, Yveltal EX is not being rotated in my, shall we say, what was the video? What did I call it? In my quick look, in my general guide to the rotation, I foolishly said it had been rotated. I'm a silly boy. There was the Bacon, or Shiny Yveltal, but he looks so much like Bacon, we're calling him Bacon Yveltal, which was released as a promo in the recent tin, so he is kept in the format for a little while yet, ladies and gentlemen. So dark decks were facing the loss of both Yveltal and Yveltal EX, but reprints have saved them. One card that is not being saved is Aromatisse, and that's very, very sad. Aromatisse was one of those decks, or one of those cards really, that just opened up the format. It allowed you to move all of your fairy energy around, except it wasn't just fairy energy, it was also rainbow energy, and actually in Expanded, it also gave you prism energy. And there's two ways to play Aromatisse. Either you can use, as I like to put it, you can go full on fairy and just play fairy attackers. So maybe something like a Mega Gardevoir EX, for instance. And you would just play a whole bunch of fairy energy. You would use Xerneas to, use a Geomancy attack to attach 2 energy from your deck to your bench. And you would just go ahead and move the energy around. Nowadays, of course, we've got Max Potion, which has been reprinted, which you can go ahead and heal. And of course, you can move the energy off using Aromatisse. Play the Max Potion to heal your Pokemon, and then move the energy back on with Aromatisse. Or you could play a toolboxy deck with Rainbow Energy, or in Expanded Prism Energy. Next Destiny's not legal in Standard, is legal in Expanded. And you could use a variety of attackers and essentially be able to hit for any weakness whatsoever. This was pretty good, quite frankly. Now, this was one of those weird decks which saw a bit of play here and then dropped off the radar. And then you'd go to a tournament and some guy will be playing it and doing really well. Or gal. Ladies played this deck too. I'm not so much upset that it's been rotated because everyone was playing it. I'm upset it's been rotated because there was so much potential here for it to keep coming back. Speaking of fairy Pokemon we've lost Slurpuff. Slurpuff. Always get that one wrong. The ability Sweet Veil, basically it meant that if there's any fairy energy attached to your Pokemon, then they cannot be affected by special conditions. That sounds pretty good. Now, it wasn't only fairy Pokemon. It was any Pokemon that had fairy energy attached. But then, of course, you would go ahead and, you'd either be playing fairy energy or you'd be playing rainbow, which counted as fairy energy. Now, we do actually have Wonder Energy still in the format. This was printed in Primal Clash. It can only be attached to a fairy Pokemon, but it means that all effects of your opponent's attacks, except damage, are not done to your fairy Pokemon. Now, that's a little bit different. Slurpuff stops special conditions however they are put on, whether it's through an attack or a trainer like Hypnotoxic Laser in Expanded, whereas Wonder Energy stops all effects of attacks. So for argument's sake, if a Jirachi comes out, it can do 10 damage, or probably 20 actually, because most fairy Pokemon are weak to metal, but it would not be able to discard the Wonder Energy because that's an effect of an attack done to the Pokemon. However, something like a Hypnotoxic Laser in Expanded would go through Wonder Energy. So we have a little bit of a replacement here. It ain't perfect by any stretch of the imagination. But, there we go. As a bit of a side note, you got to feel a bit sorry for Slurpuff because there was another good Slurpuff. And it allowed you to draw extra cards. And it was printed in Phantom Forces, which means it's getting rotated as well. Which means the only Slurpuff which is going to be legal next season is the terrible, terrible one from Generations. They gave him 2 playable cards and they rotated them both, and that's a little bit mean. And the final Pokemon I want to mention is Xerneas. Now, he was reprinted as X and Y 05, probably she I should say, as a promo, which has also been rotated, and weirdly, even though Yveltal got a reprint in Generations, Xerneas didn't. A little bit weird to be perfectly honest, but it doesn't really matter because again, we're getting a reprint in Steam Siege, so it's not the end of the world. Now, we're already 15 minutes in, and I want to go through a whole bunch of trainers as well. I'm trying to keep these videos to a decent length, although, like I said, we're going far more in depth. We're not just looking at the cards that have gone, but we're looking at why they were or could be, again, used. So, if there's any Pokemon you think I missed, please pop them in the comment section. But be nice and do remember, ladies and gentlemen, that I can't go through every single Pokemon. The video would be silly. So, let's go through some trainers, a lot of which have been reprinted. First up, we've got Cassius. Cassius allows you to take a Pokemon and shuffle it into your deck with all cards attached to it. Ever since it was released, this card was overshadowed by AZ. Now, AZ forces you to discard the cards attached to it, Cassius keeps them, but AZ goes to your hand, Cassius goes to your deck. So AZ, you can pick up a Shaymin, play it back down, boom, you get access to that ability. Cassius, you've got to get it out of your deck. Far from ideal, but in something like a Primal Groudon deck, being able to use Cassius to shuffle all of that back in before he gets KO'd, and then have access to all that energy later on in the game, was a technique, it was a strategy some people did employ. Now we're losing Evo Soda, but that was reprinted in Generations. We're losing Fairy Garden, but that was reprinted in Fates Collide. We are losing Hard Charm. Now, Hard Charm was a weird reprint of Eviolite with a different name. Not entirely, I know they were very subtly different, blah, blah, blah. It was a little bit weird, but there we go. Eviolite was the basic Pokemon, Hard Charm was for any Pokemon. Point being, it saw a little bit of play. Not a huge amount, but a little bit. Some decks like Primal Groudon, for instance, went, hey, look, I've got massive HP. Now when I stick a Hard Charm on, boom. Here we go. Now, there are actually people in Primal Groudon who would choose to play Hard Charm over Focus Sash, because Focus Sash meant that you could not be KO'd in one by a Rayquaza, but then Hard Charm gave you an effective HP of 260, and Rayquaza maxed out at 240, but Hard Charm helped you in other matchups as well if you were not going to get one-hit KO'd. Fun little fact. We're losing Muscle Band. Muscle Band did an extra 20 damage. It was huge. It was played everywhere. It was, along with Floatstone, by far, those were by far the two most played item cards, or at least item tools, I should say. Now, for basic Pokemon, it's been overshadowed by Fighting Fury Belt, which only does 10 extra damage, but gives you 40 more HP, but Muscle Band will be missed. We're losing Professor Sycamore, except we're not. It was reprinted in Phantom Forces, which is also being rotated, and it was reprinted in Breakpoint, which is not. Professor's Letter was reprinted in Breakthrough. Red Card was reprinted in Generations, so they stay in the format. Roller Skates was reprinted in Phantom Forces, but that's also being rotated, so we lose Roller Skates. There were some very fast decks. Now, speed decks and roller skates got on very well. Flip a coin, if heads, draw 3 cards. It allows you to draw through your deck very, very quickly. When Lysander's Trump card was legal, this was the kind of card that was really, really useful for drawing through your deck, so you could then play Lysander's Trump card, shuffle all your cards back into your deck, and off you go. When Lysander's Trump card was out, you would play these speed decks like Seismitoad, Hammers, Laser, etc. And the theory was, I'm going to draw through my entire deck as fast as I can, then shuffle it all back. Roller Skates was very good for that. Honestly, nowadays it sees very little play. It's on a coin flip, and between cards like Shaymin EX and Trainer's Mail, we don't really need roller skates anymore. We're losing Shadow Circle, which is a little bit sad, if for no other reason than Shadow Circle, it very much formed a pair with Fairy Garden. It came out in X and Y, and Shadow Circle was for Dark and Yveltal, and released. So I suppose this could be an example of Pokemon listening and going, you know what? We're going to reprint the cards you actually want. Shauna is in X and Y. It's also in Phantom Forces. Both of these sets are being rotated, but Shauna has also been reprinted in Generations and Fates Collide, so it's been reprinted twice after the sets which are going to be rotated. We're cool. We're losing Super Potion. Now, I don't know if anyone ever really played Super Potion. I did. Now, I like to play it in my Regirock deck, which I've mentioned a few times. And the thing about Super Potion is you have to discard an energy, you heal 60 damage, which it's kind of like a Pokemon Center Lady, except it's an item, not a supporter, but you have to discard an energy. Or think of it like an underpowered Max Potion. You don't get to heal all of the damage, but you don't have to discard all of the energy. Didn't see a huge amount of play, but some decks did use it. And things like, for instance, if you were worried about a Darkrai from Dark Explorers, 2 Night Spears put 60 on the bench, Super Potion takes all 60 off. And if you don't have an energy attached, it just allows you to heal 60 damage. You heal the damage, then you discard an energy. Oh, I've healed the damage. Oh no, there's no energy attached to it. Don't have to discard it. And that's the last real card that's being rotated. Team Flare Grunt was reprinted in Generations. Double Colourless Energy was reprinted in Phantom Forces, which is also rotating. But not unlike Shauna, was also reprinted in both Generations and Fates Collide. And Rainbow Energy was reprinted in Breakthrough. And like I've said, ladies and gentlemen, if it's been reprinted, you can use any one of them, unless the text is substantially different, of course. So something like a really old Super Rod, which is nothing like new Super Rod, you're not allowed to use. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the cards we lose from the X and Y expansion. This video is long for. Like I said, we are going into a bit of detail here, looking at the cards, essentially little more than a list. I hope it's been enjoyable. There is a comment section. Seriously, let me know. I'm planning on doing one of these for Flash, Fire, Furious Fist and Phantom Forces, but if you don't want these videos, if you're not enjoying these videos, I'll just do some other videos instead. I shan't be too offended, just a little bit of a cry and a phone call to my girlfriend, which will consist mostly of crying and sobbing while saying between sobs, why do they hate me? Why do they hate me? There is a like button, make sure you click it, ladies and gentlemen, and there is a subscribe button. I give you very similar advice, although if you've already subscribed on your behalf, get a friend to subscribe. Why not? Could be fun. I'm going to be back in a couple of days with my look at the Flash Fire expansion, and then of course we're going to be following up with the rest. So make sure you're subscribed, join me again very soon, and of course, as always, by far the most important thing, look after yourselves till next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.